Hi guys, in the previous section, we have been familiar with the concept of critical thinking. Now, I would like to introduce to you some instructional strategy for developing critical thinking in a language class. To be more specific, we will look at explicit instruction, visual questioning, and active, cooperative learning strategies. In the integration of the critical thinking into subject courses, two general approaches are frequently discussed: explicit and implicit instruction. The explicit instruction, also named as the infusion approach by Ennis in 1989, called for the direct teaching of critical thinking principles, especially those related to the subject area. The implicit teaching, called by Ennis as some kind of immersion approach, does not make the CT critical thinking instruction distinct. In other words, the explicit instruction aims to advance critical thinking competence by making the expected critical thinking skills and disposition clear to the students. In the implicit critical thinking instruction, however, although students might well be engaged in deep subject content learning, basic critical thinking concepts are not introduced. It is expected that the critical thinking can be developed as a natural consequence of the content learning. To effectively incorporate critical thinking in the rich context of specific courses, researchers have strongly argued for explicit teaching, as learning how to think critically is not an automatic byproduct of studying certain subjects. It is argued that subject course instruction, even with the implicit emphasis on critical thought or critical analysis, will not effectively prepare students to become excellent critical thinkers. Critical thinking should be practiced deliberately and taught explicitly as an indispensable part of the curriculum. Effectiveness of explicit critical thinking instruction had also received empirical support. Based on a meta-analysis of over 100 empirical studies, Arami in 2008 concluded that, although the results were mixed, explicit teaching generally has a larger effects on critical thinking development, whereas the implicit instruction were least effective. It is revealed that in regular course instruction, direct teaching of specific critical thinking skills such as argument analysis and critical reading skills significantly improve college student critical thinking performance and metacognition. Teaching critical thinking overtly and explicitly is particularly necessary to students from non-Western cultural backgrounds, as they are found lack of experience and practice in critical thinking. Explicit instruction in EFL classroom requires that the teacher must not only understand how critical thinking relates to language learning, but also be able to explain, model, infuse the concept of critical thinking in their lesson design and classroom activities. In English reading instruction, for example, students and teachers can explicitly teach the following key critical thinking skills related to reading through explaining, modeling, as well as student practicing. These skills involve analytical skills or analysis, such as identifying main claims and supported reasons, identifying the writing techniques, and summarizing the main idea. Inferential skills such as inference and interpretation, such as making predictions, detecting the author's purposes and tone, drawing logic conclusions, and interpreting figurative language. And evaluative skills like evaluation and explanation, such as evaluating the accuracy and credibility of the claims, evidence, sources, evaluating the logic strengths of arguments, distinguishing facts from opinions, questioning the text, commenting on the author's use of language. Specific procedure for explicit teaching of these skills can follow the guidelines suggested by Breyer in 2008. We consider of detailed explanations and modeling of thinking skill procedures and rules. Explicit instruction on how and when to apply a thinking skill. Systematic skill practice for autonomous use, and supportive feedback and continuing coaching. Meanwhile, explicit instruction should simultaneously attend to the critical thinking dispositions. Now, we are moving on to teacher questioning. Questioning is an important way to stimulate students to think critically. Teachers' questions can be classified into two general categories: lower-level questions and higher-level questions. Lower-level questions, also known as factual or literal questions, call for recognition and recall of factual information previously presented by the teacher. Questions at the higher level, on the other hand, require students to manipulate previously learned information to create a response. These questions go beyond the memory and factual information and require students greater effort to infer, analyze, and evaluate. The level of student thinking generally relates to the levels of the questions that the teacher poses. If the teacher systematically raises the level of their questions, students tend to raise the level of their responses correspondingly. In English language teaching, much discussed has closed questions, display referential questions. Closed questions often elicit one or small number of possible responses, while open questions can have various responses and acceptable answers. For displaced questions, the teacher already knows the answer. On contrary, reference questions seek new information from students and teachers that don't have the answers in mind. Numerous studies have indicated that language teachers in general tend to ask more lower-level closed display questions, which elicits restricted and less linguistically complex responses. On the other hand, the high-level, open, referential questions are less commonly used. While acknowledging the instructional values of low-level questions, Turn in 2007 posits that predominance of the lower cognitive questions places a student in a passive position by depriving them of the opportunity to think independently and critically. Another strategy to engage students in critical thinking is asking follow-up probing questions, sometimes known as Socratic questions. In an ESL classroom, probing is an effective questioning technique which elicited longer, more complex responses. The detailed list of probing questions presented by Paul and Elder in 2006 can be applied into English language classroom. Question for clarification, for example, could you please explain further? Questions about different point of views or perspective, for example, what would someone who disagrees say? And questions to challenge or prompt student assumption, reason, evidence, implications, and purposes. In addition to asking high-level or probing questions, other questioning techniques are also considered effective in prompting student critical thinking. For example, teacher also should allow adequate wait time for students to reflect and formulate reasoned response. This is particularly necessary when the questions posed are at a higher level and demanding for English language learners. In classroom practices, however, teachers tend to dominate the teacher-student interaction by rapid exchanges of questions and responses. This real-life interaction is more likely to place students in passive roles and dampen their initiative and critical thinking. Moreover, language teachers should avoid answering their own questions after a short silence time, a common harmful teaching habit that shifts the work of thinking and learning away from learners. In brief, posing higher-level questions and employing prompting question technique facilitate learners to infer, judge, evaluate, expand their ideas, and third, had greater potential to simulate critical thinking. At the same time, to engage students in critical thinking, teachers must have a genuine interaction with the student and provide them with adequate time for reflection. Now we move on with the active and collaborative learning strategy. Active and cooperative learning strategies are necessary to develop critical thinking. Researchers have suggested adopting active and cooperative learning, which focuses on student participation, cooperation, and interaction. Active group interaction provides students chances to exchange ideas, take responsibility, and become critical thinkers. Some of the proposed strategies include role-playing, simulation, or group teaching techniques in which the student act out a real-life situation, group research projects, a method which involves investigation or surveys about certain topic and reporting of the findings in various ways, such as presentations, newspapers, plays, skills, and debates, and peer critiquing or peer evaluation. In particular, group discussion, debate, and peer questioning are recommended as the three basic, yet very potentially effective strategies that can be adopted in EFL classrooms. As an alternative to traditional lecture method, discussion is a teaching technique that involves an exchange of ideas. With active learning and participation by all concerned, group discussion has been regarded as an effective way to facilitate deep learning and critical thinking development. Because discussion requires students to think through and clarify their ideas, and also provides students with a perspective and insight of others through exchanging ideas. Effective group discussion depends on the provision of the group goals to learn something, individual accountability, and the student engagement. In order to promote critical thinking and the student involvement in EFL classroom, it is crucial to instruct them the ground rules and the skill for group discussion, such as listening attentively, responding appropriately, building on others' ideas, inviting others to respond, asking clarifying questions, expressing agreement and disagreement with a position supported by adequate evidence, providing and requesting justification for assertions, challenging ideas, but not people. Meanwhile, to stimulate critical thinking among English learners, the choice of appropriate discussion topics also counts. Teacher needs to choose thought-provoking topics that are pertinent to the student life experience and can hold their interest. Cultural differences, controversial issues, current events, and moral dilemma may serve the purpose very well. Debate, a formal discussion method, is highly recommended as another ideal teaching tool for developing critical thinking. As a form of active learning, debate induces students to research a topic deeply, ask cogent questions, identify contradictions and errors, and formulate evidence-based arguments. It has been demonstrated that the debate format, compared with lecture, better facilitates students' higher-order cognitive skills of application and critical evaluation. Choosing controversial issues for the student to debate can not only increase the student participation and language use, but also facilitate critical thinking development. As a typical debate presents only two views, for and against, other forms of debate can employ as well. For example, four-corner debate where the student may choose one of the four positions: strong agree, agree, disagree, and strong disagree on a topic to argue. And role-play debate, a format in which the students are assigned to take on different roles and argue on behalf of several perspectives on an issue. Another useful strategy is reciprocal peer questioning. Reciprocal peer questioning is recommended as a useful strategy for promoting critical thinking and critical reading skills. In reciprocal peer questioning, students work in pairs on small groups, taking turns to pose and prepare questions and answer each other's questions. Questioning and sharing responses in small groups could help students to improve critical analysis and understanding of the text. The empirical study by King in 1992 found that students in peer questioning groups ask more critical thinking versus recall questions, produce higher level elaborated explanation, and greater learning achievement than students using questions individually or engage in group discussion without such question prompts. To help students generate high-level questions, teachers can explain typical questions type and model the questioning process in English reading by Think Aloud. Another helpful way is to providing students with generic question stamps as prompts. For example, a question stamp suggests, how does, affect, call for the skills of analysis of relationship between ideas, cause and effect. The question, what would happen if, for example, requires making prediction. Do you agree or disagree with the statement? Support your idea with blah blah blah. Prompts the respondents to evaluate and provide evidence. It is expected that as they regularly and frequently pose and answer questions of others of their own, students develop their skill and habits of questioning and began to become critical thinkers. Overall, the aforementioned strategies, for example, group discussion, debate, and reciprocal questioning, can be used as effective ways to enhance student critical thinking in EFL classes. The point is that teachers provide appropriate guidance and adequate chances for the student to interact with each other and share different ideas. That is the end of the video. Thank you for listening.